We're going to take up SB 172, and she has authorized Claire Stagg to come up and start with presentation of the bill until she gets here. So if we can notify Senator Colomb that we're getting started on her bill. And in the meantime, Senator Gaddy has personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have some wonderful visitors here today from Glenbrook in Minden, my district. So guys, if y'all will stand up for us. If you're from Glenbrook, please stand up. These guys have traveled a long way to hear us today. We thank y'all for your service to our area, and I hope y'all enjoy your day at the Capitol.
All right.
That's a low chair.
Senator Colomb.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Members, I have a bill that I'm bringing on behalf of the ladies beside me and many others from the LSU community. It is Bill 172, and basically what the bill does is it mandates that you can marry at the minimum age of 18. The ladies have lots of documentation and rationale why we would want to do this, and I'm going to let them talk about it a little bit.
Hi, my name's Claire Stagg. I'm the Vice President of Tigers Against Trafficking at LSU, and thanks for your time today. Louisiana has no statutory minimum age when it comes to marriage. This means that with the permission of your parents or a juvenile court judge, a child of any age can get married. Any age can get married. A nonprofit called Unchained at Last has documented cases of children as young as 12 years old being married in Louisiana. The U.S. State Department describes marriage under 18 as a human rights abuse that contributes to economic hardship, leads to underinvestment in girls' educational and healthcare needs, and enables violence and insecurity, including, in so many cases, domestic violence. So the State Department condemns marriage under 18 overseas, but we're allowing it right here at home. And that's pretty unconscionable. We're talking about kids who are too young to provide consent, who are too young to take legal action under their own name if they needed to escape a forced marriage that was violent or dangerous or abusive. But somehow the state still considers these children old enough to marry. In the last 15 years, over 200,000 minors there have been over 200,000 documented cases of minors being married in the United States, and 86% of these cases involved underage girls marrying grown men. In Louisiana, we say we value family, we value justice, and we value opportunity, but right now we're part of a really insidious problem, and it doesn't have to be this way. Since 2016, several states have passed legislation very similar to this, including Virginia, Connecticut, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky. This is just in the last couple of years. And these states have chosen to be part of the solution instead of the problem, and we can do the same here in Louisiana. This committee passed a pretty similar bill last year, and so I'm asking you to do the same today and send it to the full Senate for a vote, because it's there's really no reason for us to have young children getting married in the state of Louisiana. Thank you.
All right. We have a question from Senator Luna real quick.
Let me give you a reason, the same one I gave you guys last time. You have two 17-year-olds been dating all through high school, and there's a pregnancy, and they don't want to have a child out of wedlock. We're preventing them from doing that. And look, and I understand, I don't think anybody up here or anybody in this room, for that matter, is in favor of old men marrying children. That's not the issue here. But the issue is you catch these other kids in that same net, and that's a big religious issue with a whole lot of people. Is it possible that a parent can coerce a child into doing that? Sure. But it might be them too. I can tell you something. I lived alone since I was 17 years old. Some young people are more mature than others. I understand all those issues, but you're casting a big net here.
Are you asking
We may be casting a big net, but I mean, when the overwhelming majority of these cases are not 17-year-olds marrying 17-year-olds, they're young girls marrying grown men, and that might be due to coercion. I'm sorry, that may be due to a pregnancy. That there's a variety of reasons that happens, but it's just not the case in the vast majority of these situations that 17-year-olds are marrying 17-year-olds.
Maybe the way to do it, and I think I made the suggestion last time, maybe the way to do it is to require that under 18, they all have to go through the court system. They have to go through a juvenile court and get permission from the court. I mean, maybe that's an alternative. I don't, I'm telling you, after it just came up as a thought last year when you guys had this bill, and after that, I had lots of preachers talk to me and say how much they appreciated me raising that, because it is an issue. And like I said, you're casting a really big net here, and there's not much room for forgiveness in the right setting, and that's what concerns me about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator, are you suggesting an amendment?
I don't know, quite honestly. I don't know that.
Well, because, and the reason I say that is because if you're 17 years old, a 17-year-old is certainly much more mature in most instances than a 13-year-old marrying somebody that's 35 or 25. So, maybe we do it like you suggest at a certain age, because you certainly wouldn't want a 13 or 12-year-old or 15-year-old getting married under the law that we have that's existing at this point.
Okay. The law currently under Children's Code Article 1545 says that a minor under the age of 16 must also obtain written authorization to marry from the judge of the court exercising juvenile jurisdiction. So we do have that in the law. So those 12 and 14-year-olds are getting married. Somebody convinced a judge somewhere, or they're not legally married in Louisiana.
Or there's a signature required from a parent or a guardian.
That's if they're over 16.
Right.
If they're under 16, it has to be through a court. So those instances that you're talking about, that's not in Louisiana. I mean, they don't have a legal.
They are in Louisiana.
Well, then they don't have a legal marriage, because the law says you cannot. And that's when under this one it says unless they have to have an authorization from a court exercising juvenile jurisdiction in the parish where the minor resides. So if they don't have that, it's not a legal marriage. And you're not going to stop illegal marriages. I mean, people do all kind of ceremonies and stuff all the time that have no legal effect.
I mean, is it not a problem that we absolutely have judges signing off on 12-year-olds getting married at some point in the last 15 years in Louisiana? Is that not,
It's problematic for me. I mean, I don't think a 12-year-old should be married, period. I mean, I just don't. I don't disagree with that. But again, what's that number? I mean, there was a time in our society when 12 and 13-year-olds were married frequently.
That's true, but not in modern times.
Exactly. I mean, now it's 30 before they want to get married. But it's a difficult thing for me to get my head or my hand around on this. I don't know how to amend it to make it where it's more palatable for me, actually. Anyway, just some thoughts, and I know this young lady would like to say something. So,
ma'am, I know you hadn't had the opportunity to speak. If you'd like to go ahead and do that,
Sir.
go ahead.
My name is Michelle Sorensen. I'm a secretary with Tigers Against Trafficking. I usually work in victim outreach and community advocacy. So today I have assembled a testimony from a Louisiana taxpayer, citizen, and voter who was in a child marriage and currently resides in the state of Louisiana. So if you would let me. Hello. First, let me say what a delight it is to watch young people be passionate about serving others and turning that passion into change. Please note that I'm writing this to you with a desire to remain anonymous. In 1990, I was a troubled 15-year-old youth. I was a habitual runaway, dabbled in drugs, dropped out of high school, and was generally a nuisance to my family. Upon returning from a stint as a runaway, my parents would not let me return home unless I agreed to attend 12-step meetings, either Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. While I knew I didn't qualify to be at those meetings, I was required to attend. It was at the meeting that I met a 28-year-old man who pursued me. Over the next 2 years, we dated, and I was given a taste of what would become my life. While dating Mr. K, I did clean up my life, got back in school, became a straight-A student, got a driver's license, and was starting to imagine a future for myself. I attempted to attend a trade school, however, the cost was prohibitive. Since Mr. K attended the sales presentation for the trade school with me, he zeroed in on financial aid requirements. It was explained that the financial aid package was to be based on my parents' income. The cost of the school was $12,000. Under my parents' income, assistance granted to me was $4,000. I didn't have the balance of $8,000. It was explained to us that if I was married, my financial aid package would be based off of my husband's income. Mr. K looked at me and said, "It's decided, we'll marry." I sold myself into marriage for $8,000. There were warning signs. However, my youth and exuberance kept me feeling that it would be all right. I was 17, Mr. K was 30. In the state of California, my parents were required to sign papers allowing me to marry. Mr. K was very persuasive that he loved me and would be a good husband to me, so my parents signed the papers. My wedding photos do not show a blushing bride. They show a horrified young woman who was in too deep and afraid to back out. The narcissist I married now had a captive. The list of my transgressions was to become long and distinguished. If you were to believe Mr. K, you would know that I was stupid, ignorant, couldn't do anything right. I was ugly, my legs were ugly. I was so worthless I couldn't pay my bills. I was a terrible cook. I was just garbage that would be nothing without Mr. K. I was forever accused of cheating on him with the neighbors, school friends, acquaintances. I was terrified of Mr. K because every transgression earned me an entire night of beratement. He yelled, screamed, and berated me all night long and would not allow me to attend to a screaming baby. He did this until I agreed that he was right. I was worthless. If you're unfamiliar with the term gaslighting means to manipulate someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. One child led to another child, and I endured. I focused on my babies. It was decided that I would stay home with the children, which kept me under his thumb. I tried so hard to keep peace. I tried not to anger Mr. K because his words degraded my soul. I hated that my babies heard all the awful things he had to say about me. As they got older, they would start to cry when I cried. It was agreed that yes, I was garbage and was fortunate that he was willing to be my husband. I did manage to find a stride in life. I became a PTA president and got a taste of what it was like to be liked, supported, and generally thought of as smart. It felt good. I became acquainted with a woman who liked me so much she offered me a job, so I entered the workforce. At work, I was a rock star. At home, I was garbage. As I rose in the ranks professionally, I gained life confidence. I was starting to disagree that there was something wrong with me. As home life was deteriorating, At home, life was deteriorating as Mr. K disagreed. I began to make more money than he did and was still just worthless. I was such a terrible mother that if he left me, I'd never see the children again. Ken became so enraged with me, he did become physical. While he never hit me, he certainly shoved me and kept me from attending to our children. I was fortunate as my career started to lead me to success that defied even my best expectations in my life. I was a rock star at work and began to take back my power. I'd solve complex problems at work and come home to degradation, humiliation, and all night long runs of the threat of violence. As a Christmas party for my employer approached, I needed a dress to wear. Mr. K was adamant that we not waste the money. I was supposed to present awards, work the room of 200 employees, and Mr. K wanted me to wear work clothes so as to not waste our money. We fought and fought up all night long as I was browbeaten. I won that fight and bought a new dress that would facilitate the end of my marriage. At that party, I did my job, was celebrated as the youngest female executive that achieved rock star status. Mr. K had to sit at the head table with the wives. Can you imagine where this is headed? Mr. K had a thunderous look on his face. My bosses inquired if everything was okay. I knew it wasn't. I didn't want to go home. We never made it to the car before he started in on me. Who was I fucking? Did I know what an ass I looked like? All dressed up when everyone knows how worthless I am. It went on and on. What I didn't know is that my boss followed us and heard every word. I came into work the following Monday and was summoned to the boss's office, which was full of people, some I didn't recognize. My bosses had a police officer, a divorce attorney, and a counselor from a woman's shelter. I was filled with shame and spent some time trying to explain that everything was okay, that Mr. K was right. I was garbage. It did take them a while as they presented books and papers all explaining abuse. I left that meeting knowing that I was abused. I was 29 years old, executive vice president, mother, and a survivor of abuse. I went home that night and quietly told Mr. K that our marriage was over. The next weeks and months were awful for me and our children. I kept calm and followed the experts' advice on how to handle it. During the day, the crisis counselor would coach me on what to say and how to say it. My bosses supported me every day as I extricated myself and my children from this awful life. When I divorced Mr. K, his final torture was divorcing our children and blaming me. This was the ultimate abuse. The healing has taken 15 years for all of us. However, we are finally living our best life. I have no regrets as my children are spectacular women in every way. I believe my oldest daughter still believes that I am the cause of her dad leaving us. However, I'm finally at peace. I'm a blessed survivor of abuse. My life has taken turns that enabled me to raise my girls alone, pay for college on my own, and now I'm building a life for myself. I'm not worthless. A 30-year-old man should not have been granted a marriage to a 17-year-old girl. Young women need time to mature before they enter a legally binding marriage. The risks are too great to place vulnerable young women at the mercy of others. Give them time to mature and grow and gain confidence in their decisions. People, parents, and youth can be manipulated. Please protect young women and pass a law that gives the time they deserve to make legally binding decisions. All my best, not garbage.
And thank you for reading that. Appreciate it. Ma'am.
Good morning, Susan East Nelson. I'm here on behalf of the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. To answer some of your questions, Senator Luno, unfortunately there are judges that are still doing this in Louisiana, and they're in really small rural towns where everybody knows everybody and everybody's okay with it. Probably not happening in your big city of Alexandria, but it is still a problem. And I think one of the solutions that might be plausible here is that we require minors who want to get married to emancipate themselves, because then they would have full legal rights to do any contract, not just marriage. So that could be a possible solution to the 17-year-old issue.
Let me interject something. When a minor is married, they're emancipated by virtue of being married.
Yes, sir, I'm aware of the law. The issue is, though, we don't let them enter into any other contracts prior to marriage until they're married at 17, correct? So if they emancipated them, then the court would say that you're old enough to do any kind of contract, including marriage, and then they could hire a caterer for the wedding, which they couldn't do prior to a wedding if they were only 17.
I guess what I'm failing to understand is how that helps with the problem that we're trying to solve here.
Well, because they'd have to go before a judge and prove that they have the capacity to be emancipated.
Well, if they're under 16 and under, they have to do that already.
Correct.
They're supposed to do it. The law says that
and
they
I
have
would
to
say
do it.
that part of it would have to be that the court would have to be aware of all the situation and the parties being married, and then sign off on them to be fully emancipated regardless.
And look, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. What I'm telling you is, though, the law already contemplates that. If they're not doing it, that's the problem. And changing the law to where you have to be 18 to be married is not going to remedy that problem. If a judge is not doing what they're supposed to do, shame on the judge, and we need to do something about that.
I think the process for emancipation is slightly more detailed than the process for approving a marriage. That's my interjection. If my memory of civil procedure serves me rightly, the process for emancipation is much more involved than having a judge sign off on a marriage. So this might be the
I've
extra
never
step.
seen that, but honestly, I used to do a whole lot of juvenile work many years ago, and never found that to be the case. But I'm not disputing it. I guess it's possible. It depends on beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. So.
I mean, I think if there's one child under the age of 16 that's being married to someone who is an older person, that's one too many.
Yeah, I agree.
And we need
I
to
don't
set a
disagree with
floor in Louisiana. We have no floor. There is no floor. So, I mean, if you don't want it to be 18, let's make it 16. Let's make it 15 and say no. That's too young.
Well, let me. And this lady would like to speak to, and I won't let her do that, but make a suggestion. It sounds like to me you guys have some really good ideas and some really good goals that you're trying to achieve here. But maybe we need to look at it and study it and come up with a bill that doesn't cast such a wide net and tries to target on the issues that you're raising, while not excluding those people that may be ready. They may be mature enough. I was thinking while we're sitting here talking, I have friends that they were married when they were 17 years old. I saw a picture of them the other day, and they have about 20 grandkids now. They had 4 or 5 kids, and I mean, wonderful marriage. It happens sometimes. This letter that you read from that lady, I know that happens sometimes too. It was a horrible marriage. It probably should have never happened, but that can happen even when they're a year or two apart. I mean, it doesn't. That's not an age-specific thing. Anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we're just coming right up here, and I keep hearing you say things. My name's Morgan Lamondre. I'm going to throw out a suggestion I made actually last year. I'm here on behalf of the Star Center, and I think what it boils down to is we might not all disagree. We might not all agree that 18-year-olds should get married, but I think most of us agree that when technically any kind of sex within that marriage would otherwise be illegal, if it were not for that marriage, then that is where we should regulate. So right now, if you're a minor under the age of 17 and you have sex with somebody who is 17 years or older, factually or not, that is a crime. That would be carnal knowledge of a juvenile. So where you can regulate, and I'll do what Senator Martini always suggests, with all due respect, I don't believe we need to study it. I think that we can just say that if any kind of consummation of the marriage would otherwise be a crime had it not been within the marriage, then that is where we need to regulate. That's my suggestion. Hopefully I don't strike out.
All right. Well, we had a question from Senator Donahue, but he stepped out for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and read these cards in support of the bill. Well, hold on. Senator Martini here.
Let me come back at you. So what does your amendment say?
My amendment says that instead of, you take out on that first page where it talks about what are the requirements for a marriage. I actually have it in my head if anybody has a copy. Does anybody have a copy? So on page 1, you delete line 16. You add, wherever you can fit it, another impediment to marriage somewhere. And the impediment to marriage would somehow say that when the individual is under the age of 17 and there is an age difference between the parties that are at least 2 years, basically you're trying to make it look like the cardinal knowledge of a juvenile statute.
Yeah, you make it like statutory rape would
Correct.
be another
Correct.
impediment.
But I wouldn't put it under Article 87 as what is the contract of marriage requirements. I would just keep it as the absence of a legal impediment and put another legal impediment as when the age of the parties, when it's a minor. Now, obviously, once you're an adult, you're not going to have this as an impediment because it wouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
No strikeout?
And I think that would
making sense doesn't necessarily mean anything to this building.
That's true. This is
but
Jude,
it does,
right?
But it does make sense.
Well, and I think that would require the judge then to sign off on, if he was required to sign off on the marriage, then he would know that both parties
By the
were
ages.
the proper age, and that would be appropriate. And that would pull in all those people under your net that you're concerned about, Senator Luna.
Because I think right now people are like, well, there isn't necessarily a crime taking place if it's before the marriage. But I think there's a lot of times you are seeing where people are pregnant. and they're not being investigated. And at that point, those juvenile court judges should be referring those individuals for prosecution, and it's not happening. And I'm not so sure I would say that it's not happening necessarily in Alexandria. I mean, STAR works in Alexandria, and we are very much involved in the juvenile court system. So I'll just say that.
So your amendment would say if the consummation of the marriage would be a criminal offense were it not for it being a marriage, that would be the impediment? I know that's not very well
I'd
stated.
probably not say it like that, but I would probably say it using the language of the cardinal knowledge of a juvenile statute. So when the individual is under the age of 17 and the age difference between the parties, basically you're saying that regardless of factual consent, that it would be a legal impediment. So I'm happy to work on that and give it to you all and have it ready to go for the floor. You're thinking hard. This is good. This is a good sign. I watch you too much on this
It
committee.
doesn't happen that often. Yeah,
See,
so. You've been watching me, I think.
I
with
know.
all due respect.
I'm always
I got it.
prepared for you.
I
That's
got
why I
it.
know, with all due respect.
All
you
right,
said.
because once you say that, you know you're not going to get respected. So
If we put
Well-
enough lawyers on anything, we can fix it, right?
that's said a lot in this building. So, well, it all depends. I'm more than willing to work on that amendment between here and the floor. Your task is
I
to
will
get
do
it
it.
out of here. So I tell you what.
Well-
are we finished? Or if somebody else want to
Yeah,
testify?
I'm gonna
So
read these
I'll make a
cards.
motion to report the bill favorably, and then with the understanding that if it gets out and we can't come to a consensus on an amendment, you know.
Yeah,
Feeling good. I'm feeling good, Senator
So-
Luna. You're gonna get it.
so we have a, and I know we spoke about or y'all spoke about the number of other states that have done this. How many is that again?
In the last 3 years, it would be, you need to go to the mic, Claire. I'm sorry.
I apologize, but there's a reason I'm asking.
In the last 3 years, it was the states of, so sorry, finding my place, Virginia, Connecticut, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky. So like 5 or 6.
Okay. And have they been able to keep up with any
Data.
any numbers or data in terms of how it's affected? You know, a lot of times we make an attempt to make corrective action to something, but as we all know, just because we put something in law, that doesn't necessarily mean that the bad actors follow that law. And so I guess that's one of my questions is how has that changed what's going on or what is going on in those states?
I am going to throw that back to an actual lawyer.
Okay.
So to answer your question, right now the Department of Health has statistics each year on the age. It's currently set up to where it says age of bride, age of groom. Obviously, there may be issues that need to be worked out to where if you're seeing same-sex marriages at this point. The last year of data that they have is in 2010. I would imagine that's published to their website. I would imagine they have more data since then. It's just not published to the website. So you can very clearly see who's falling into those age categories where there are quite a number of 15 to 17-year-olds marrying 15 to 17-year-olds. That's not the age we're targeting. But in 2010, you can see where it says on there, like, age of bride, 15 to 17, and 40-something-year-old man, you know. And what's also troubling is you're not seeing that in the reverse, where you're seeing as many boys marrying older women. So Department of Health will be able to monitor it because they publish the statistics each year. So if the law goes into effect and we see that something's not happening, we can also figure out, because they'll have the records to know which parish this is coming from. So we
Right.
actually do have a really clear way of monitoring this.
Well, and I guess, and maybe like in the states where it's been outlawed, maybe it becomes harder to monitor. You know, like if some of those relationships just simply go offline, I guess. And so, do we if you take some action to stop bad actors from doing something, has there been any correlation in those states that those relationships have tapered off in any way?
You mean talking about like any kind of abusive relationships? I would say that no matter what, you're not going to necessarily be able to track that, but I would imagine that in states like, I know Texas, they have a very robust coalition against domestic violence where they do have a lot of statistics related to how many protection orders, and unfortunately you're not going to solve maybe the domestic violence stuff. I think you're going to be able to target more of the trafficking and other related issues.
Right.
So.
I understand. And we have another question or two. I think one of my concerns sometimes is that we do something and we prohibit the 18-year-old that wants to marry the 17-year-old.
That wouldn't be affected with my amendment.
Okay. But then we're not necessarily having the effect that we desire on the other relationships because maybe they just bypass the marriage side of things and just continue to move forward with the relationship. Senator Luna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, just so you'll know that they pull the criminal code statute form there. It's under Title 14, Section 80, and it says when the difference of age of the victim and the age of the offender is 4 years or greater. So it's
That
not
is
two,
for
it's 4
felony
years.
cardinal knowledge. Misdemeanor cardinal knowledge is 2.
Okay. The 2 year, again, your net's getting bigger there. It's,
No, the net was way bigger at 18, but
well, I understand that, but I'm trying to reach a compromise
Right.
here with you. That's, instead of saying, "Oh, this is a bad bill, let's do away with it," I'm trying to figure out what we
Right.
can do. I don't think these young people that are here today from up in Senator Gaddy's district, I don't think any of them ought to be married. They're too young. So I think we need to pick a arbitrary number. And when I say arbitrary, I mean for no reason other than it just doesn't make sense to do it, and say you can't get married until that age. Maybe that number is 15 or 16. I don't know what it is, but we need a number. I just don't think 18 is the number. And when you get your net too tight again, you're going to get resistance. Under the heading of something is better than nothing, maybe we
course.
need to go with the felony statute and the 4-year difference, because you're going to take out some of those 16 and 18-year-olds, and that's common because of how birthdays fall, and they're only 1 year apart in school. And we know that kids often date, and when they're in high school and they're 1 grade apart, that happens all the time. So and look, it happens in situations where kids are dating, and things go too far with them, and a parent wants revenge on that child, and you can ruin someone's life because these 2 kids made a bad mistake. It happens. It just does. Now, does that allow maybe somebody to slip under the net? It does, but every law we have, there's exceptions to every single one. So you're not gonna totally eliminate it. But I think that's a good direction to go, Senator Colomb. If we were to amend and set an arbitrary age, say nobody under 15.
What I was thinking when you were saying that, I was thinking it could be the driving age, because when we allow them to drive after they go through the training and that kind of thing, and I think that's maybe 16.
We're to give them some training in marriage before we
No,
let
but I mean,
them
if
get
you let them
married,
on a
too.
road with a car,
You're right. You're exactly right.
We make them wait that long to drive. And
Well, I'll tell you what I'm
marriage
going to try to
is
do
much more
today,
serious.
because I think this is an interesting subject, if nothing else. I think what I'm going to do today is I'm going to move to report the bill favorably, and let's work toward an amendment
Okay.
when we get to the floor and see about. I really want to see an absolute floor. I think I agree. It's something we need in Louisiana. It's a black eye on the state for not having that. So we need to correct that, and then maybe we can do this amendment where we look at the
4 year.
difference in age on the felony grade crime. Because I agree, you shouldn't be exempted from a felony crime just because you're in a marriage contract. So.
Yeah, and I think that with the difference between the misdemeanor versus the felony cardinal knowledge, you don't have to register for the sex offender registry at the 2 year mark, but you definitely do for the 4 year mark.
Right.
So, obviously it's not my bill, but that is something I'd say is a great compromise. And
Okay.
see, look at this.
So you commit to working with us?
Absolutely. I'll go to my office and write it right now for you. Make your lives so much
We
easier.
hadn't voted yet, so don't get carried away now.
I have faith in you.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, if there's opposition, we can move and let the opposition come up. But if there's no opposition, then I think Senator Luno and Senator Martini and maybe the other members will agree to let.
I'm going to do a substitute to defer, just to make it complicated.
Senator Milkovich hasn't said anything yet. Let's keep this going.
Okay, so what I'm saying is if there is no opposition, and opposition doesn't want to, if there's no opposition, then we can move, let the opposition come up. If not, if we can spare the committee some time, and I commit that I won't move it until the committee is agreeable on the floor and we can work out something, and that'll save you guys some time.
And I know we all trust that if we move it out of the committee, that you'll hold it until
Absolutely.
everybody's agreeable to something. I'm going to read the cards in support, but you don't have anything else? Okay. Susan Nelson, Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. Michelle Sorson, Tigers Against Trafficking. Claire Stagg, Tigers Against Trafficking. Morgan Lamondre, Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. Marissa Baisley, Tigers Against Trafficking. Sarah Thibodeau, Tigers Against Trafficking. Donald Dunn, Tigers Against Trafficking. And Ann Sturr, Executive Director of National Association of Social Workers. All right, that was, and there are no opposition cards at this point. So, at
Senator
this
Martini or
point, the
Luno?
board
Or
is
motion?
clear. There was a motion to report Senate Bill 172 favorably with the agreement that we would work
Absolutely.
between here on the floor to see if we can figure out some way to
get
do
a
something
floor.
that everybody can agree would be a good floor.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, this is my first time in this committee ever, so I just want to thank y'all for the fair hearing.
Thank you.